Good evening, everybody. Tonight we're going to study Revelation 20. Last week we read Revelation 19 and we saw how the wedding of the Lamb happened right before the war of Armageddon, how they were both connected in several ways. For instance, the fact that the bride is dressed in fine linen and is the same clothing pretty much mentioned when it comes to the army, the heavenly army, showing that they are one and the same. So the bride is the army, for they are both the chosen few. Other than that, it is also interesting that when there is a wedding, there is a feast and there is food for a lot of people. So we also notice how during Revelation 19, the wedding of the Lamb happens. And then right afterwards, we read about the dinner or this. Well, let's go and read it for a second. Verse 17. And I saw one messenger standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in the mid heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great Elohim. So after the wedding of the Lamb, there's a supper for the birds of the sky, for the angels of the heavens, and they will eat the leaders of the world, those who have deceived the nations, as well as those who have followed them all the way to that moment at that war. So right after the war, and this chapter ends with verse 21, and it says, "And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the throne, and all the birds were filled with their flesh." In verse 5, it said, "And a voice came from the throne." So that's how, well, that's when I explained about the throne being the last, just like Mashiach is the um, the temple. So the temple and the ark of the covenant within it, the ark of the covenant is the throne of the Almighty in in this world on the earth, since the throne of Yahweh also is written to be the firmament, the heavens. But when it comes to the representation of it within this reality, it was the Ark of the Covenant within the temple. So the temple and the Ark as a representation of the first and the last. So that's why a voice came from the throne, because it is the throne speaking, and the throne is the voice of Yahweh. So the presence of Yahweh and the Lamb sits in the throne, and that's why the throne can speak. And that's why at the end it says, "And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh." Um, so making reference again to the voice, which throws pretty much the sword, and the sword being the word of Yahweh, which is interesting because the sword is S plus a word, so it could be the saving word, which is Yahushua. So the sword is the name of the Messiah, and obviously the teaching, the testimony of Yahushua, which comes out of the mouth of he who rides the white horse. So, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. So going to Revelation 20, it begins with, "And I saw a messenger," or a malach, "coming down from the heavens, having the key of the pit of the deep and a great chain in his hand." So another malach, and it says, "And I saw a malach coming down from the heavens," similar to what we read in Revelation 9, when the malach falls to the earth with the key to open the bottomless pit for the locusts to come out, and Abaddon or Apollyon to enter this reality and eventually enter the image of the beast, which will be prepared for it. So once again, "And I saw a messenger coming down from the heavens, having the key of the pit of the deep and a great chain in his hand." Like I said, it's similar to Revelation 9, but there are several differences. So let me go back to Revelation 9 for a moment. And it says, "And the fifth messenger sounded, and I saw a star from the heavens, which had fallen to the earth." A star represents an angel. In this case, we see that it says that had fallen. So there is a difference between to fall of Revelation 9. So that is an evil angel, and to come down as in being sent. The other one says a star falling, as in losing its light and being losing from the firmament. And then we have here a messenger coming down to do something. So it is similar in the sense that it is about an angel coming to this reality. However, the one in Revelation 9 is a fallen angel coming down to open the pit for evil to come out into this reality. While in this chapter, it is a messenger coming down to close it and put something inside for the next 1,000 years. So once again, and I saw a messenger coming down from the heavens, having the key of the pit of the deep, and a great chain in his hand. And he seized the dragon. He seized the dragon. As we know, the dragon is the one mentioned in Revelation 12 when Michael fights the dragon, Satan, Lucifer, and takes him out of heaven. When he comes down to the earth, he will enter the image of the beast and appear to the world as if he was the Messiah, or he will claim to be Christ. So that will be pretty much the abomination of desolation. That dragon is the same one that gives powers to the world leader and the false prophet of Revelation 13. So, as we know in the previous chapter, the false prophet and the beast, the two beasts of Revelation 13, will be thrown alive into the lake of fire. But then we have here the dragon, which is Lucifer. That is important because to a lot of people, mostly Christians, the beast and the Antichrist are the same person. If that were the case, then the dragon would be the beast. And if that were so, then the dragon would be already in the lake of fire and he would have been thrown there alive, according to the previous chapter. However, we have here that now, after the beast and the false prophet are thrown in the lake of fire alive, the dragon is being seized by this messenger. So, and he sees the dragon, the serpent of old, same title given to the serpent or the dragon in Revelation 12, who is the devil and Satan, pretty much the accuser and the adversary. The accuser, for he was placed on the right hand, while Samael on the left hand at the beginning of creation, to represent justice and, well, righteousness and unrighteousness. So he was in charge of keeping the earth in check with the law. However, that made him the accuser. So he began to accuse humans who were breaking the law. So that's how he became the accuser and the adversary of humans, when he saw humans as evil, as well, many other things, also as a threat. For Yahweh made reality for us, and some angels saw that as a threat or something that they wanted to stop, for they wanted it for themselves. Not understanding, of course, the plan of Yahweh, which involves the whole creation, yet they were short-sighted pretty much through the wicked wisdom of the darkness that was within Samael and passed down to Lucifer, which made them do what they did. So, and he sees the dragon, the serpent of all, who is the devil and Satan, the accuser and the adversary, and bound him for 1,000 years. This verse, I believe, is important, at least to understand this, because a lot of people, first of all, think that the book of Revelation or the apocalypse is just about destruction, about death, fear, and they are afraid of reading it even. So they stay away from it, thinking that apocalypse means destruction, when it means revelation, the Almighty revealing what is going to happen. And if we read it, we realize that even though there will be pain for those who are wicked, those who are away from the Almighty, those who are in the rebellion, etc., the time of happiness will come right after a new world, a new earth. And that is amazing to know. Yet, obviously, the lack of faith of many and others, the lack of knowledge of the book, makes them not even care about it or think about it or believe in it. But we have here that Satan, the accuser, the one who has been making this world as it is, he will be taken out for 1,000 years. Just like Abaddon has been in the bottomless pit for several um, years, well, millennia, depending on, well, how we um, see it. Because if we take the book of Hanok, pretty much he would have been there since the time of Noah. So he would be pretty angry. However, because of certain things that have been said throughout the years and through mythology, um, it seems as if he has had some sort of influence in history somehow, either through witchcraft that people practice, being able to communicate with it even in that prison, perhaps just like somebody can call somebody in jail. In a way, through witchcraft they can communicate with it, and that's how he has influenced history. Or as some would claim or believe, he sometime in the past was able to come out for whatever reason. But I will go with the first option. So and I say that because we see here that Satan will be there for 1,000 years. Yet if we take the book of Hanok and take it from there, then Azazel, Abaddon, would have been in the bottomless pit for around 4,500 years, perhaps 5,000 years even. Well, a little bit less. So now it would be the time for Lucifer to go in there. That is important because also a lot of people confuse Satan with Azazel, or, well, Satan, remember, is a title, so it fits Azazel also. But they confuse Lucifer with Azazel. But Lucifer fell on Revelation 12. So that means that Lucifer is still in heaven at this moment, not in the highest heaven, of course, in the second heaven. So the one that comes out of the bottomless pit is Azazel, Abaddon. He will use the beast to kill the two witnesses. And when the dragon falls with it, they will pretty much fool the world by appearing within the image of the beast, which pretty much will represent Samael as the flesh. For Samael is in the flesh as the inclination to evil. And that's how the false Messiah will have the body connected with Samael, the soul being Azazel, Abaddon, and the spirit, the ruler of the air, Lucifer, Halel. So just like, and this is also important to understand, just like the Almighty made Adam from, well, the body of Adam from the dust, then the spirit came from the heavens, and the soul, when it dies, goes to Sheol, since the enemy will copy everything that the Almighty did, and he will be allowed to make an image just like Yahweh made man in his image. Then Satan in Revelation 13 will make an image, so he will make a body, since they know pretty much a lot about um, well, human DNA and genetics, pretty much, to be able to build a body in a lab, a clone even, or whatever, how they end up doing it. So that body would be that which they take from the soil, from the earth, the matter. Then the spirit of Satan will come down from heaven, and the soul of Abaddon, the destroyer, will come up from Sheol, the bottomless pit. So that's how they will copy what Elohim did in Genesis when creating man in his image and likeness, being the likeness, his spirit entering the body. So when the spirit of Satan enters the body of the beast, the image of the beast, then the false Messiah will be complete, and that's how he will be able to kill those who do not worship him. So going back to the verse, and he seized the dragon. So he's seizing the one who came down from heaven. Now is his turn to go to prison, to uh, hell for 1,000 years. I repeat, a lot of people think that Satan is in hell and thinking that Satan is only Lucifer. Yet the title Satan feeds a lot of evil entities, but mainly three entities. The first one, which was Samael, the second Hillel, and the third Azazel. And those three will pretty much unite in order to fool the whole world and to turn the world against the Almighty Creator, who presents himself as first and last. So that's why also the copy of three elements. So he sees the dragon, the serpent of all, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. 1,000 years, which is the Shabbat, the 1,000 years of rest from evil. That's what the Shabbat actually means and represents, because he who sins, well, the wages of sin is death. So he who sins is a slave to sin, therefore works for the enemy, for he is a slave. Not knowing what he does, he's just doing it, for he is a slave. So when we are not supposed to work on Shabbat, represents not being a slave on Shabbat, not a slave to falsehood, to the world, to sin, but become a servant of Yahweh. That's why we must seek the presence of Yahweh on Shabbat. So the actual Shabbat is the 1,000 years. For one day is like 1,000 years. Like, well, 1,000 years in the perspective of humans is like a day in Elohim's perspective. So the one day in the week is to represent the 1,000 years at the end of history. And since during this past 6,000 years, Satan, the accuser, has been influencing the world, being the God of the world, as they call him, the mighty one of the world. He has been able to control history, humanity, obviously, till the point that Yahweh allows him, until this moment when he's about to establish the new world order, and will last for 3.5 years, and then will be taken out for that 1,000 years that we're seeing here. So for 6,000 years, since the moment when the serpent of all confused pretty much Eve in order for her to eat the fruit of knowledge, and from that moment on, humanity ended up under the authority of Hillel, Lucifer, the serpent of all, till obviously Yahushua came and took that power from him. Obviously, when it comes to those who accept Yahushua as Savior, for the rest of the world still remains under the power of Hillel, the serpent of all. So even after 2,000 years, we see the influence of the enemy in the world, and even what eating of the fruit ended up doing in our flesh, because we see we feel the desires of the flesh trying to lead us away from the Almighty Creator. So we see the power that was given for a time to the enemy over humanity through an outside influence of Hillel and an inside influence of Samael in the flesh, the inclination to evil in the heart. But Yahweh is about to put an end to that. And when Lucifer is thrown in the lake of fire, I mean, right now it will be in hell, the bottomless pit, for the first 1,000 years. That will be a time in which there will be no evil in the world, for his influence will no longer be in this reality. So that will be an amazing time, for the world will rest from war, from evil, from envy, and from other feelings. There will be some nations who eventually will, as we are about to see, come against us. But during the 1,000 years, they won't have that evil influence over them, turning them against us, as during the past 6,000 years, as Yahudim, being hated by the rest. So, verse 3, and he threw him into the pit of the deep and shut him up and set a seal on him, so that he should lead the nations no more astray until the 1,000 years were ended. So we see there how the nations have been led astray by the serpent of old. That's why the nations act the way they act. And when I say, well, pretty much the nations nowadays pretty much means the whole world, and we are scattered throughout the whole world within those nations, hating the way the world acts and feels and does things, in the sense that scripture tells us that we must hate evil. Therefore, we notice that we are not of this world through the fact that we are not happy with the world as it is, for it needs a change, and that change pretty much will begin when Lucifer is thrown in hell. So when he threw him into the pit of the deep and shut him up and set a seal on him, so that he should lead the nations no more astray until the 1,000 years were ended. So that means that after 1,000 years, he will be allowed to lead the nations astray once again, for the last time. For the first and last, the two manifestations of Yahweh during this reality during the first 6,000 years, as the Son and the Son of Man, meaning as the light of the world, and then as the Son of Man in the 4,000 year, and then in the 6,000. Those two manifestations will bring this moment in which there will be 1,000 years of rest. But after the 1,000 years, there will be a time, and we could say perhaps even another chance for the nations. For, I repeat, the first manifestation of the Almighty was to give a chance to the Yahudim, to the Israelites. The second time, to give a chance to the Gentiles. So it's all around the world. Obviously, during the first manifestation, Yahweh also gave an opening to the Gentiles, so the Gentiles were able to enter even right after his resurrection. In the same sense, Yahweh will take away the veil that has blinded the Yahudim, the true Yahudim, during the past 2,000 years, during these end times. So even though Messiah came to Israel, he did it also for the many, for the many nations. And now that the last is coming to the nations, obviously is doing it also for the Israelites, for they are across the whole world, scattered amongst those nations. So another thing that I wanted to say is that, so Yahweh has given two chances, and then 1,000 years of rest have to happen, for he said it in Genesis. And right after the 1,000 years, pretty much we could say the week will start again. So that's why Satan will be freed from that prison, which will work pretty much as a jail, being a preparation for judgment. And then after judgment, he will enter prison. So after the 1,000 years, he will come out and fool the nations once again. Sadly, the nations, after being for 1,000 years without that influence, once that influence begins to happen, they won't know what hit them pretty much. So I repeat the verse, and he threw him into the pit of the deep and shut him up and set a seal on him, so that he should lead the nations no more astray until the 1,000 years were ended. And after that, he has to be released for a little while. He has to be released for a little while. It's part of the plan. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yahushua, and because of the word of Elohim, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands. And they lived and reigned with Mashiach for 1,000 years. So here we see pretty much the people that will enter the 1,000 years, the first resurrection. Those who will rule and those who will inhabit the promised land, the New Jerusalem, even. So, and I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yahushua, which is to believe that the Messiah came and died for our sins, and the Almighty raised him from the dead. And because of the word of Yahweh, which according to the previous chapter, Revelation 19, verse 13, is the name of the Messiah, Yahushua. So because of the witness they bore to Yahushua, and because of the word of Elohim, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands, and they lived and reigned with Mashiach for 1,000 years. And the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. So I repeat, there are two resurrections, one at the beginning of the 1,000 years, in which obviously the chosen few who are transformed without having to die will enter as kings and priests, and also as those who are invited to the wedding of the Lamb, the many who were killed for not accepting the mark of the beast. So pretty much those who will be transformed without dying, and those who will experience death during the Great Tribulation, those will be the ones who will be on earth for the 1,000 years. And they lived and reigned with Mashiach for 1,000 years. Remember also that even though the 144,000 will get a very high place in the kingdom, they are the flesh of the body of Mashiach, while the many are servants of the throne as the blood in the body. Yet because of the fact that they had to go to the Great Tribulation without accepting the mark of the beast, will allow them, Yahweh will allow them to enter the 1,000 years and be part of the body, and even could be said to reign, I repeat, because of that tribulation they went through, and because they are part of the body as the blood. So, and the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. So like I have also said, just like Yehuda was the king of the Israelites, yet Yosef became the king of the nations. Yahushua came for the Israelites. The last comes for the nations. From Yosef came Ephraim, which represents the many who are within the nations. Therefore, that is also how the few who accept Yahushua HaMashiach will be able to see him, while the many who do not accept the first, and even the last until it's too late, will only be able to see the last from Ephraim. When the first and last become one, we will see how Yahweh deals with the image, in the sense that I repeat, Yahushua said to the few, to the disciples, you will see me, yet the world will see me no more. That is because the world rejected him. So the world will have to deal with the last, the second coming, the son of Joseph, just like Egypt and the rest of the nations that were under Egypt had to deal with Joseph during the 7 years of hunger. So just like the chosen few will rule over the many will rule over the nations. The chosen few, like Yehuda, ruling over the many, Israel. Yet Israel ruling over the nations, just like Ephraim or Yahusef ruling over the whole world when he was a leader in Egypt. So the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. Blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. So the scripture tells us that this first resurrection is special. It is a gift to be part of this generation in which we are living, because it gives us a chance to be part of the 1,000 years of the millennium of rest. As we can also read in the Gnostic books, we find that some of the disciples were even a little bit jealous of us when they realized all the blessings that the Almighty was going to give to us, because of the fact that we would be in the end times, the darkest of all times, the worst of all generations, and we would believe without seeing the Messiah. So there are many blessings that the Almighty has prepared for us. And I repeat, even for the many who will be willing to die once they realize that the two witnesses were saying the true doctrine and all of that we know from Revelation 11 and other parts of scriptures. So verse 6, blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. The second death possesses no authority over these. The second death possesses no authority over these. So they won't have any issues with death ever again for eternity. Second death, which is the death of the soul, the death which comes through judgment, in judgment day, I mean, which is about to happen in the chapter. The second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Mashiach, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. The second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Mashiach, and shall reign with him for 1,000 years. And when the 1,000 years have ended, Satan shall be released from his prison, and he shall go out to lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. This is important because a lot of people are expecting the war of Gog and Magog anytime soon, yet don't realize that the war of Gog and Magog will happen until Revelation 20, like we're seeing right here. The true, or the biggest, or the complete fulfillment of the war of Gog and Magog will be at the end of the 1,000 years. What we are about to see as the second seal, the third war, that will be like an image of the war of Gog and Magog. So it will be connected to what we see in Ezekiel 38, as we're about to read also in the studies in Spanish. So there will be a shadow of what will happen at the end of 1,000 years. But this, I repeat, will be just a shadow. The same countries will be part of it, no doubt. Obviously, I mean, same countries, because, well, we will see in, let's just go to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 38, and the word of Yahweh came to me saying, son of man, as I would say, remember that Yahushua speaks in the third person about the second coming. The coming of the Son of Man will be like the days of Noah, for instance. So the title Son of Man, obviously it fits anybody in the world, but when it comes to scriptures and the way the Almighty uses it, represents the second coming. Even when Yahushua used it in reference to himself and to the second coming, because when he did it in third person was to refer to himself without other people realizing it, and also to prophesy about the last. So Yahushua came as a man, so it fits him also. However, he came mainly as the seed of the woman, prophesied in Genesis 3:15. So the seed of the woman, because he came from a virgin. Son of Man makes reference to a person that comes from the seed of the man. That's why he comes with the sin that came from Adam all the way to us, sin which must be taken away by what Yahushua did as the first. So the Son of Man, the title, represents the second coming. And that is a title that the Almighty uses with Ezekiel a lot. Pretty much all the time that he talks to him, Yahweh calls him Son of Man, for Ezekiel represents the second coming. the last. And when I say second coming, I mean the second coming of Yahweh to this earth, while Yahushua remains at the right hand of the Father. For the Father in Psalm 110 said, sit at my right hand until I go down and put your enemies as your footstool. So Yahweh will come down once again to the earth during the second manifestation, for he himself said, I am the first and the last. So Yahushua the first will remain in heaven, as we see in Revelation 6, when he opens the first seal, and the last appears on earth as his messenger, mentioned also on Revelation 22. So I will read a little bit of Ezekiel a little bit fast. So it says, Son of man, set your face against Gog. Gog was a giant. So the giant, the spirit of the giant, could be said to, well, we know that scripture says that the spirits of giants would remain on this earth as evil spirits, for they could not go to Sheol, for Sheol was made for angels and humans. In the heavens is for the angels. The giants were an abomination, so they could not go up nor down, so they remain on earth as evil spirits. And that would mean that the spirit of Gog remain on earth, fooling the nations, as we see here. Magog pretty much means from Gog, and it is seen as Gog being the leader and Magog being the nation. Gog, the giant, and Magog, the people that followed him. So this represents Satan and the nations that work for Satan and will fight for him. Q 38, in order to see the concordance. We have Gog. I already said what Magog is. But let's look at a few more. Well, it will mention a lot of names. Pretty much referring to the nations that will fight or will unite against Israel during these end times. Here we have Gog. Hopefully you're seeing it. Yes, okay. So Gog is a Gimel, Vav Gimel. And we see in Revelation that it says, when the 1,000 years have ended, Satan shall be released from his prison, and he shall go to lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth. Gog and Magog. So here, Gog and Magog represents all nations that will unite against us, who will be in Israel by that time. So this, I repeat, is the true war of Ezekiel 38. For right now, the true Israel is not in Israel. If there are any, there are very few of them. But I repeat, since Satan copies everything, he is trying to fulfill the scriptures. So he will fulfill that war in order to make Christians, for instance, and Jews believe that everything that they have been expecting is fulfilling, so that they will accept the false Messiah and the beast. The beast will be accepted by the Jews and the false Messiah by the Christians. He shall go out to lead the nations. So he will go out all around the world to lead the nations astray. And we see the name Gog is a Gimel, Vav Gimel. A Gimel is a foot. So that is pretty much his feet walking around the earth, talking to humans, which are represented by the Vav. So he goes walking around, moving people around to do his bidding, pretty much. And he represents, well, it means mountain. They translate it as mountain, has to do with the fact that he was a giant. But it is said that he tried to kill Moshe, and Moshe killed him first. Well, actually, he wanted to kill the whole nation of Israel because he was a giant. So he picked up a mountain, and he was about to throw it to Israel. So Moshe came and cut his ankle. So that made him pretty much lose grip of the mountain, which fell on top of him and covered him, and it became his grave. It is said that till this day, you can go and see that mountain. So you can search for it. Perhaps I can do it right now. That's a name that they gave to several mountains because of their size. But I'll have to look a little bit deeper for it because it looks different. They put a bunch of rocks around it, around the top, to pretty much commemorate what bones it has inside. So, in the real mountain of Yahu and Mahuch, Gog and Magog. So yeah, you see there are talks regarding it and looking for it. So yeah, there's a whole mountain that covered him and became his grave. So um then we go to Magog, which says land of Gog, or from Gog, really, because it is the Mem and Gog. And then it comes Meshech and other things that we will see eventually when we read Ezekiel. Thou shalt be brought to Baal. So we can see how the meaning of the names have to do with what the enemy will do in this world. The Almighty will bring him out to destroy. So thou shalt be brought, um, drawing out from the mountain, etc., etc., etc. So as I was reading Ezekiel 38, son of man, set your face against Gog in the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh. It is said that Rosh became Rosha, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against them. And so it is said of Turkey, like, so Russia and Turkey pretty much like the main nations mentioned throughout this chapter. Then we can include Iran and other close by nations that are gathering against Israel at the moment. And you shall say, thus says the sovereign Yahweh, see, I am against you, O Gog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and I shall turn you around. So Rosh means head. And well, we just saw how it would be the head that is drawing out, thou shalt be brought. And in a way, it connects with the book of Daniel and the prophecies about how Yahweh will make the beast fall. The beast as the world leader who will fight for Gog. So, and I shall turn you around and shall put hooks into your jaws and shall lead you out with all your army, horses and horsemen, clad perfectly, a great assembly with armor and shields, all of them handling swords. Then comes Iran, Persia, Cush, and Phut are with them, all of them with shield and helmet. So it continues, like I said, we will read that eventually. And there are also a lot of studies regarding this chapter, because I repeat, pretty much all Christianity is awaiting this war. And well, they are seeing it because the nations that are gathering are pretty much the same. Yet most Christians actually expect the war to happen after the rapture. So they are expecting the war as a sign that they are about to leave this earth. However, imagine what will happen when the war begins and they are still on this earth. Confusion will be really bad for a lot of them, sadly, because of not perhaps studying scriptures a bit deeper. So going back to Revelation. And he shall go out to lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and to gather them together for battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. So by that time, after 1,000 years, without crime in this world, the nations, the few that remain amongst the nations alive after the war of Armageddon, pretty much those who did not get the mark, but they were not really of Yahweh, but they hid in caves and stuff like that. As Daniel 12 says about those who will be happy if they are able to wait for 1,335 days, which are 45 days after the abomination of desolation is taken out. So if they are able to sustain that time, 1,335 days, they will be able to remain on earth and they will be able to multiply. And after 1,000 years, they will be like the sand of the sea. This is very important also because most Christians I think most Christians believe that what is about to happen is just a rapture. Everybody goes up, then plagues come down, and then that's it. Everybody will live eternity in heaven, and that's it. Not understanding that there will be 1,000 more years on this earth, but a perfect world. The nations will exist, they will multiply, and they will become like the sand of the sea in a matter of those thousand years. And like I said, without crime and without a bunch of other things that kill people, the number will be very great. So it is important to understand that other than us in Israel, there will be people around the world multiplying once again, because it is also like the time of Noah. Remember that after Noah, they had to multiply once again and fill the earth. So that will happen during those 1,000 years. And he shall go out and lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. And they came up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the set apart ones and the beloved city. This word right here, well, I'm gonna go and see it in concordance, Revelation 20, verse 9. This is interesting. It says, and they went up on this word is platos, which is a plate, as in something flat and perhaps even a little bit like raised on the edges, right? Like a plate, so that the food doesn't go out. So it calls the earth a plate, not a sphere. That's the point. And if you go to, well, I'm gonna show it. Hopefully I'll find it quickly on the galleries of our website, losdelcamino.net, which you can also find through thewayofyahweh.org. If you go to universe, I'm not sure if it's in both the English and the Spanish one. So let me just check here first. There was a magazine that interviewed a man that was able to go very high up in the sky and was able to see the earth for the first time from that high up. And he was asked what he saw. And he said in that interview, and it is found in a magazine, he said that it was like a plate. Here it is. In the magazine Popular Science of August 1931, flat, well, that is before NASA, right? You can read all of this, but I'm just going to read right here what is within the red lines. And it says, it seemed a flat disc with upturned edge. It seemed a flat disc with upturned edge. So he was interviewed and he saw a disc with flat edge, which could also be called a plate, like platos in Greek, which is what the scripture calls it. So I hope that was clear. And also this is important. On the right, it says regarding a flying machine that they were creating. It says, this report documents the derivation and definition of a linear aircraft model for a rigid aircraft of mass flying over a flat, non-rotating Earth. Why would you build that? Where would it work unless you are living in a flat, non-rotating Earth? So they had to write that so that they wouldn't take into account things that are not existent, pretty much. So, and you can, well, see the source and everything. But Going back to Revelation 20. And they came up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the set apart ones. The camp that will be, as we see in during the Exodus, pretty much how the Israelites surrounded the Ark of the Covenant. In the same way, the tribes will surround as a camp the Ark, meaning the throne, where the Lamb will be. So surrounded the camp of the set apart ones and the beloved city, Jerusalem. And fire came down from Elohim out of the heavens and consumed them. So for those who may be worried or thinking that it is a bad idea to let Satan out, we see that this time there will be no tribulation. This time there will be no pain, no issue for Israel or his people. Simply, Yahweh will make fire come down from heaven and destroy all the armies assembling against us. And we know that the nations will hate the two witnesses, and the false prophet will make fire come down from heaven to kill them. So Yahweh will pay them back 1,000 years later, when the nations, not understanding anything from history, will once again fall in the same trap that the enemy will prepare for them. Yet this time, fire will come down from heaven to consume them. So they came up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the set apart ones and the beloved city, and fire came down from Elohim out of the heavens and consumed them. And the devil who led them astray was thrown into the lake of fire. So the lake of fire pretty much is open now for the dragon who had been in the bottomless pit, which is another place, which is in hell. So the bottomless pit is the worst part of hell, but the bottomless pit is not as bad as the lake of fire. That's why hell itself will be thrown in the lake of fire eventually. So Lucifer, Satan, Hallel, will be in hell. Then he will come out, influence the nations to come against us. Fire will come down to destroy them. And then Hallel, because of that one last job, will be now condemned to eternal damnation in the lake of fire. So, and the devil who led them astray was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast, to the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and his false prophet are. So once again, we see three entities: the devil, which would be eventually the false Messiah, the beast, which is the world leader, and the false prophet, the second beast, the religious leader. And I repeat that again and again, because in Christianity, they tend to confuse the beast with the Antichrist. So, and the devil who led them astray was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are. And they shall be tortured day and night forever and ever. A lot of people claim that hell doesn't exist, that Yahushua never spoke of hell, or that hell is pretty much not mentioned in the new covenant. And I don't know where they get that from, because I guess they haven't read that much, or because it says lake of fire instead of hell. I don't know. And also because of certain verses about how Satan will stop existing forever, they think that that means that he will be destroyed and will have an end. However, there is no end within eternity. So once you enter the eternal reality, whatever is happening there will be eternal, won't stop. So their destruction will be eternal, and that will be the torture, their shame and confusion forever. So they shall be tortured day and night forever and ever. And I saw a great white throne. So remember how the last came on a white horse, then Mashiach as one, first and last as one, Revelation 19, on a white horse. And then the throne speaking. And now we see a white throne. Once again, that is the last, having been washed through the blood of the Messiah, Mashiach, the Lamb, becoming the throne in order to receive the presence of Yahweh and the Lamb on him. So, and I saw a great throne, a great white throne, and him who was sitting on it, from whose face the earth and the heavens fled away, and no place was found for them. So once the first and last become one, which will be the manifestation, the ultimate manifestation of Yahweh in the flesh, for Yahweh is first and last. And in Zechariah, it says he will be one and his name will be one. So once he is one, he will be the representation, well, meaning Mashiach, of the creator of all things, before whom all things fled because of his greatness. Nothing is worthy of being beside him unless he makes us worthy through the blood of his son, Yahushua HaMashiach, who came to die without sin. So, and I saw a great white throne, and him who was sitting on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away. That is at the end of the 1,000 years, because a new earth and a new heavens will come. And that's why this reality, this temporal dimension, will flee from his face, for this dimension will be pretty much destroyed in fire, for he won't be able to sustain the presence of the most set apart one. And the way it says this here, whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, from whose face the earth and the heavens fled away, and no place was found for them. No place was found for them. It's very similar to what is said regarding the dragon and his angels in Revelation 12, verse 8. But they were not strong enough, nor was a place found for them in the heavens any longer. So once the last finally fulfills his mission, he will enter the heavens, and Satan won't have any place in there any longer. So he will have to come to this reality. But afterwards, after 1,000 years of us in this reality, and the Almighty sending fire to destroy Gog and Magog, even reality, this temporal world won't be able to continue. So it will be destroyed by fleeing from the presence of the Most High. And no place was found for them, for the earth and the heavens. So if no place will be found for them, they will really cease to exist, which is interesting, because that means that no place will be found for them. That means there's no space anymore for that reality at that, well, for this reality at that time. So it will really not exist anymore. However, there will be a place for those who will be tortured forever and ever, and that's the lake of fire. So that means that they can be tortured forever and ever, yet the earth and the heavens won't exist anymore, for no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, small and great. Small and great. It doesn't mean young and old. It means small in deeds, in faith, in other things, like well, obviously in the word great, it refers to spiritual greatness or power in this reality, great authority, like presidents, judges, and all of that people worship in this world. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne. So right after the 1,000 years, we are here once again at the throne for Judgment Day. So judgment will be after 1,000 years. That is also important to understand. For a lot of people think the judgment will come right after their death. There is a judgment there, but it's not the final judgment. And also some other people think that it's at the beginning of the 7,000 years, but we just read here how it is at the end after Gog and Magog, because right at that moment, now the Almighty can finally judge all humans from all human history of the past, at that time, 7,000 years. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne. It is interesting how the scripture continues to mention the throne, the throne, the throne. It could say the Lamb, it could say Elohim, it could say the judge, but it says the throne, and the throne, because the throne represents the person in which the spirit of judgment will be. So, and I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and books were open. Books were open, and another book was open. So there are several books that have the deeds of all who are in this world, and even the words that have come out of our mouths. But then there is another book, which is the book of life, that has the names of those who will enter, who will be justified on Judgment Day. It is also important, a lot of people believe in Christianity mainly, like the doctrine of favor, well, grace, and well, saved by grace, which I understand they claim to take it from scriptures, yet they take it out of context, and that's the issue, because they make a whole doctrine thinking that you don't have to change your works, you just have to believe, and then you will be saved without doing anything else, which is false. And I remember once talking about this chapter, well, talking about that subject with a person that at first claimed to be like a missionary and pastor. Well, he started as pastor, I believe, then he went to missionary, and then he kept going down, in the sense of when he realized that he didn't know what he believed, he kept backing up on the titles that he held. um and it was sad, because he was very, very surprised when I showed him this verse, because he was one who claimed that it's all about faith, all about belief, as if he never read the verse that says that faith without works is dead. So going back to this verse, it says, and I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and books were open, and another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books, according to their works. So it doesn't say according to their faith. It says according to their works. That is very important, because that means that we must do works. It doesn't mean that we will be saved through works, but works are the sign of faith. So that's why Yahweh will judge through the works, because the works will show who has faith. As Paul said it, show me your faith without works, and I will show you my faith through the works. So, and the dead were judged from what was written in the books. So the books have all the deeds and the words of every person, and according to those works, they will be judged. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. There are, like, if we take that in the literal sense, it would mean those who have died in the sea, drowned, eaten, and so forth. In the spiritual sense, it means those of the nations from Gog and Magog, who were just destroyed from fire from the heavens. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to the works, and the sea gave up the dead who were in it. And death and Sheol gave up the dead who were in them. And death and Sheol gave up the dead who were in them. So 3 places are mentioned for the souls of the dead: the sea, the death, and Sheol, which can be separated as the, well, the three groups that will enter the heavens, well, the kingdom of heaven, the few, the many, and the nations. But on the wicked side, those who are lost from the sea, which is connected to the Gentile nations who are pagans, the death, who follow the false Messiah, who is death instead of the true Messiah, who is life, and Sheol, which is where hell is, as in death and Sheol follow during the fourth seal, in contrast to life and paradise of the first seal. In contrast, of course, from the white horse and the pale horse, which brings death and Sheol follows. So this could be seen also as three different levels of evil people. The sea gave up the dead who were in it, and the death and Sheol gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one according to his works. In this case, in Sheol, there will be some who are in the good part, and they will be judged and justified, because there will be some justified in this judgment, of course. And they were judged, each one according to his works. And death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. Death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. So the angel that came out of Samael as death, that entity will be finally in the lake of fire as well, with the beast, the false prophet, and the dragon. And Sheol, which is the place, death and Sheol can be seen as time and space, for time brings death eventually, and Sheol is the place where the dead go. So death and Sheol were thrown in the lake of fire can be seen as time and space will be over, in the sense of space for any evil and time for any sin will be done. It will be thrown in the lake of fire. And since there will be no death as it is nowadays, then there will be no longer any need for Sheol to exist. For Sheol is a place like the sea, where the rivers go for the water to go back up to the heavens in a cloud and then taken to a mountain and then goes back to Sheol. I mean, to the sea. It's the same with the life of man. The soul goes through life going down. When it dies, it goes to Sheol like the sea. So since there won't be any death like nowadays, there won't be a need for Sheol. So Sheol itself will be thrown in the lake of fire. And obviously there is a difference between the sea and a lake. Like I said, the sea is in movement, pretty much in confusion, rebellion, trying to get into, inside the earth, yet the sand doesn't allow it. So the waves go in and out. And it has salt water. And I repeat, the rivers go to the sea, but then they go up and they are taken to the mountain. So that's like reincarnation, pretty much. Yet a lake doesn't have rivers going into it. I mean, it could, but it's not normally what a lake is. A lake is closed. So it is like the eternal place for the wicked, which won't be going out and in, or in and out, as the water goes in and out of the sea during this time. And that's why what it says later, and the sea gave up the dead who were within it, and death and Sheol gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one according to his works. And death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. Death and Sheol into the lake of fire. This is the second death. When death dies, that will be the second death. Finally, when death is thrown into the lake of fire, then that is the second death. And that is the second death that won't have any power over those who lived during the first 1,000 years, the few and the many, as we just read. So death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. And if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. As we read in previous verses, those who got the mark of the beast are not written in the book of life, so they will be thrown into the lake of fire. However, by this time, it's already 1,000 years later. So we will be talking about those who were dead and awaiting judgment. Well, for the past 1,000 years. So yeah, well, during what is about to come to the earth, the plagues, the chosen few will be harvested, the many will be resurrected to enter the 1,000 years. But those who died through the plagues as wicked with the mark of the beast, they will be dead until the resurrection, the second resurrection, when they will be thrown into the lake of fire for not being in the book of life, just like anybody else who will not be found in the book of life who may have lived during the past 6,000 years, or even during the next 1,000 years as part of the nations. If they rebelled against the Almighty through the influence of Satan after coming out of the bottomless pit after the 1,000 years, when he gathers Gog and Magog, if they follow him, obviously they will be condemned. So if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So that's how the chapter ends. And something that I was going to mention from the next chapter, so we will see it clearly next week, but we see that there won't be a sea in the next world, because the sea, like I was saying, represents the nations, and it represents, well, pagan nations, and that cycle of life that is called normally reincarnation, which won't be part of the next creation. So that's why there won't be a sea in the next reality. Revelation 21, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heavens and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. So that is because there won't be a reincarnation cycle in the next reality, in the next time, and because there won't be any confusion like the waves of the sea among the nations. But that will be for next week.